Hi everyone, welcome to Simple Local Life. It's Jen, and I'm here today with my friend Elspeth at Wile's Lake Farm Market. How are you today, Elspeth?
Well, it's sunny, so I'm good.
It is a beautiful day after a busy, long
Very
weekend.
busy, long weekend. Yes, lots of people were out, and we're very thankful for that.
Good.
And but today the sun is bright, the air is a little cool, calling for frost warning. You know, there's a frost warning out for tonight. So that brings us to our first tip of the day, which is, people asked over the weekend, can I plant? And I said, well, you need to think about not what the daytime temperatures are, but the nighttime temperatures. And my rule of thumb, and I did check it against some pretty reputable sources, is 10 degrees, 9 to 10 degrees at night. That's the night temperature. That's a lot warmer than what it's going to be tonight. And although this past week, there were some temperatures in the 8 to 9 degrees, so we are on the edge of it. So there are lots of things that you can plant, but hanging out beautiful hanging baskets, putting out a lot of the annuals, you need to be a little cautious about that right now, because it might be a little too cool.
It might be. I know a lot of people who have been stockpiling their plants and waiting and waiting, and that forecast just seems to still keep. There's always a dip or two every week, it's been. So.
A dip or two every week. It only takes one night of cold temperatures for those, particularly things like coleus and impatiens. Some of the really delicate plants really aren't going to do well if the temperature is below that kind of magic 8, 9, 10 degrees. Even through the day, I find coleus particularly, and basil, and we're going to talk about basil in a minute. But some of those plants really, they just suffer. It looks like they're shivering. And they only need a day or so, and they're done. So yes. Hi. Well, we're just doing a live broadcast of Facebook
You can
Live.
just give us a couple minutes.
You give us a couple of minutes, and we'll help you.
We're really live, folks. Can you tell? It's busy in here today in the greenhouse house, but
I'm just going to step out for a minute.
Yes. I said we could do a live show right here. There's enough people around. We could just gather our own little audience in to watch the show.
They don't realize what we're talking about.
No, I know. It's very hard to tell. We have a small little camera and setup. If you guys have any questions while we're live, I think I'll be able to see them. Today we're just kind of talking about some tips about some herbs and plants and fertilizers and things. So I know this is the prime, despite the forecast, people, it's prime gardening season. So just things to keep in mind. So if you have any general questions, well, we've got Elspeth here. It's a good time to ask those. So we want to watch those nighttime temperatures, especially
tonight because of the frost warning. And for some places, because we know this goes to lots of people in lots of areas, if you're along the coast, you may be fine. But the further inland you go, the greater the chance of frost. So just be careful. But Jennifer, you're right in saying this is prime planting week. This week, next week, the next 3 weeks are really, for us here, are the weeks we believe that most, and based on our records of sales, we know that these are the weeks when people really put the push on to get the plants out. I have not planted a single thing.
Oh, good. I haven't really either. I put in some seeds. I put in lettuce and kale and spinach seeds like 2 weeks ago. But other than that, I've been waiting because a lot of mine will be transplants or other seeds that I know the soil needs to be warmer for. So I'm like, I'm just going to wait a bit.
Well, when we did our last Facebook Live, we did it from outside in our little garden. And I said, you know what? I didn't feel like the ground was warm enough. Mark and I had a little conversation this morning about it, and we're going to plant probably either this afternoon or tomorrow. Put some seeds in, and so you could have planted things by now, but I didn't feel the ground was warm enough. We were also quite busy. So it kind of falls to the bottom of the list.
And just on that note about the frost, because I see it sometimes there's some gardening groups on Facebook. People will say this weekend, and I'm sure despite that, you probably sold a lot of, when we talk about vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers, like some people just went all out this weekend. So is there anything they can do to protect those plants tonight?
Well, I mean, if you can move them in, that would be the ideal thing. Where they, but sometimes they're already in the ground. And anything you can do, if you've got ice cream tubs or any of that, that you can sit over them to give them some protection might be helpful. But even at that, there are plants like basil and coleus, even with those temperatures and protection probably wouldn't do well.
Right.
So I mean, you take your chances. And people generally know they may be running the risk of that.
Yeah.
And you take your chances. But if you can do anything to protect, and you've got a lot of things out, if you've got planters out or hanging baskets and all of that, move them in and just take them in for the night and put them back out. I just talked with a customer when she was coming in, and she was wondering. She said, "Oh, your vegetable transplants are all inside." She said, "Do I have to harden them off?" And I said, "We turned off the furnace here because of the oil price about a week and a half ago." So our things that are here in the greenhouse probably won't need very much hardening off because they've been without any nighttime heat.
Okay.
So they obviously have the warmth of the day, but the nighttime temperatures here, we've left it to nature to take its course, and so I think they're okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So now that we've talked about the frost and the cool, and where we're at with gardening right now, what about herbs? I see you have some herbs here, and herb gardens are such a great way for people to get started, or even have a little herb pot if you don't have space for a big garden. And I just love using fresh herbs in my kitchen.
Well, I do too.
Oh, it smells so
and,
good. I smell it already.
I know. I had a little omelet this morning for breakfast, and I put some fresh basil in the omelet with some chopped tomatoes, and it was delicious.
Nice.
Yeah, and so my tip with basil, because of all the herbs that we sell, this is the one we sell the most of. And this and rosemary would be the two, and it's, I would say, too early to plant both of them.
Okay.
Rosemary likes heat, so does basil, so I would hold off on that. But my other tip around basil is people want to mix it in with other herb plants, and I think that basil does better if it's in a pot on its own.
Yes.
And I can't give you all the science behind that, but I just know from practice that it's easy to overwater it if it's mixed with other herbs, because some of the other herbs may take, depending on the weather, more water than what the basil needs.
Okay.
So it's easy to overwater it, and once it's overwatered, it gets limp pretty fast. Yeah. And there are some fungal problems that can develop easily if it's sitting in damp soil.
Okay.
So my suggestion is grow it in a pot on its own. You can mix varieties of basil together. Okay. So we have, I think, four different varieties. This is Siam Queen, and we have a nice purple basil as well.
That's beautiful.
This is a beautiful one. Much smaller leaves and quite pungent. It's called Purple Ball. And then this is the one that's more common. This is Newfar, and this is the one that many people have. But we also have a spicy globe basil, which is very popular as well. So if you have a discerning taste for basil, then you know because people ask me, what should I use? I kind of I don't have that discerning palate, so I just stick to the Newfar Sweet and like using that. But if you do, I think if you do a lot of East or Thai cooking, you'd want to select some of the other varieties as well.
Oh, nice.
But that's the tip. Don't plant basil yet. Wait till maybe the 10th or even 12th of June, like well past any chance of cold weather, and plant it on its own. So that would be my tips with basil.
Good.
But then we've got these beautiful big basil pots, which we do have basil, herb pots, which we do have basil in.
Yes.
But that wouldn't necessarily be my recommendation. This has lots of choice in it, ready to use now, and these we have available here at the market for $32.95. So they're really full and lush.
Everything.
They have everything: thyme, oregano, basil, sage, parsley, and some chives, which is a perennial, and you could transplant it out of this pot into your garden, and that would lessen the kind of. So on this, because we have a lot in here, you should be using it right away so that it continues to flourish and put out new growth.
Well, that's beautiful. So that's a great option if you don't want to plant or you just want to have a one and done. You could just pick this up and have that right on your deck or patio. Perfect.
The same with we have the lettuce pots available, and they're ready to eat right now.
They are.
But you can easily plant one. We have the transplants. You can buy a pot or use a pot at home and grow this very easily if you have limited space.
Yes.
And some people just are growing on a deck or on a patio, or don't want to dig up or run out of space in their garden and really just want a little bit of lettuce. But my tip with this is always pick the biggest leaves, because the little leaves are buried down underneath, And that's what's going to continue to produce more lettuce as over the next number of weeks.
Okay.
So with this, I usually think you can get about 3 good eatings off it.
Okay.
So it's a good buy at $8.95 because if you think of, a good sized bag of greens that we sell is $5.49. So a couple of feeds off this, you certainly well paid for one bag of greens. And remember, pick the largest leaves, pick them from down at the very base. Good to go in with scissors so you're not tearing off those tiny little new leaves that are buried inside, more towards the center of each plant.
Perfect.
A lettuce pot.
Love the lettuce pots.
And the other little thing I want to mention is that we do have we have, I think, 12 varieties of tomatoes, maybe more. I should have counted before we came on air, but we have a lot of varieties. Little cherry ones, yellow ones, orange ones, big ones, little ones, Roma, ones that are good for paste, ones that are good for slicing, ones that are good for salsa, and so forth. But the other thing that we do have is individual plants potted up in larger pots. So for some people, they only want one tomato, or they want to try a new variety. And this way, you don't have to invest in a pack of 4. You may not have room for that, but you can try one.
That's a great
This
idea.
is actually what I'm holding up is ground cherry, and it's often people think it's related to tomatoes, but ground cherries are really delicious. They have a kind of a papery covering on the fruit itself, and then they're sweet. They're often used in Mexican cooking, and they can be substituted somewhat for a tomatillo if you're interested in making salsa verde or something like that. But we have those. San Marzano, these are just a few examples. We have, I think, again, 10 or 11 different varieties in these size pots. This is San Marzano. If anybody's an Italian looking for the tomato of their choice, would be a San Marzano. Really good for Italian cooking, and a nice pasty tomato, not too watery, and lots of really good flavor. And the other one is brandy wine. And the reason I picked this one is because it's one of the heritage heirloom varieties. And so not a pretty tomato, not pretty. It's kind of lumpy, big, and late.
Like some of us, Elspeth, we're now good. I'm relating to this tomato plant as I get older. I'm like, okay.
Well, we all have lumps where we don't want them. But anyway, enough of that. But the brandy tomato is an heirloom heritage variety. Very, very flavorful tomatoes. As I said, not particularly pretty, but very flavorful and late. So you may want to make sure you match it up with a tomato that's earlier. So you've got some that are ready in August, and then some that are ready later as the season goes on. So those are just a few examples of what we have to offer. So we have them in the 4-inch pack, or in the packs of 4, and then we have single pots if you just want to try something new.
I love the idea of the single pot and having maybe, if you just have a deck or patio, I'm thinking for your parents or grandparents or someone who still like to do a little something but don't have the space, a single tomato plant and a nice little pot in a pot with a nice little pot of basil. And I mean, we've got all the makings of a nice little future summer meals. So.
One, and this reminded me of something, one customer who was obviously a new gardener, and we're very happy to help new gardeners. But they were picking vegetable transplants, and there was a pack of 4 tomatoes, I think. And they held them up and they said, so this is what, they didn't know what to do with it. And I said, okay, you need to, so I said, obviously this person really has not gardened before. So I showed them, I said, and this is what I recommend to people, you just tip the plant over, whether it's in a pot, and just loosen it on the side so that the roots, you can see there's some roots growing out. This one needs to be planted. You loosen it, and it comes out, and then you've got a beautiful array of nice roots that then you're going to plant. And in the case of tomatoes, I suggest that you plant them really deeply. You're going to plant them, in this case, you plant them right up to that, not to that set of leaves, not to that little set of leaves, but right up to the next set. And what will happen is you'll get roots coming all off that center stem, and these little leaves on the side will disappear, but you'll get roots coming out. So plant it nice and deep in the pot, from the pot. But in the case of the 4-pack, I had to show her, you need to separate that. That's not, if you put one clump of cabbage plants, they're not going to do very well. They need to be separated. Each one of those is going to develop into a head of cabbage.
That's right.
So do remember to do that.
Good.
And the other little tip, all kinds of tips today,
All
Jennifer,
kinds of tips for the
is
garden.
to
We need
use plant transplant fertilizer.
Yes.
So this is what you should use when you water in. So all our plants, we fertilized in the last day. I think yesterday we fertilized everything. So we use different fertilizers. But now when you're going to transplant those vegetable transplants or little annuals into the garden, this is the fertilizer that I recommend.
Okay.
It's called transplant fertilizer. It's high in phosphorus, which is the middle number. So it's 10, 52, 10. 10, 52, 10. So it's really high in phosphorus. That helps in the root development.
Perfect.
And that's what you want to use for the next couple of weeks. And then you're going to switch over to another type of fertilizer, which we'll talk about the next time, that you should switch from the transplant fertilizer to another type with the nutrients higher in nitrogen to drive the growth.
So let's just say if a lot of people probably picked up plants this weekend, they're getting them out later this week or next. Let's say I planted some things in my garden on Thursday. How quickly do I put that fertilizer on the transplant?
Well, I can only speak for when we fertilized last here. So usually you should ask that question, when were these things fertilized? We've never been asked that question, but I think that's a good question to ask.
Come on in, someone be the first one to ask them.
And if you're the first one to ask, we'll give you a container of
there you go.
fertilizer.
You can thank me for coming up with this good question.
But then what we usually tell people is a week after that.
Okay.
5 to 7 days
Check in
later.
with when you guys have fertilized, then a week after that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Good.
And my last tip, sorry,
No,
I
go
cut
right
you
on.
off.
No, I just...
Okay. The last tip, and I know no one likes to do this, but take the scissors
Oh, no, not this, Elspeth.
and cut
Not the
off
cutting.
cut off the flowers.
Oh.
And why am I doing that? Well, because
For the
you want,
greater good.
It is for the good of the plant. And I'm even going to cut off on this petunia. I'm going to cut these little buds off because I want the plant to be nice and full and bushy, and this will help do that. So I'm cutting all of that off. And the reason for that is, at this stage in the season, you want the plant to put all its energy into putting out a really good root system. And so the reason is, if you have a good root system, you'll have a plant that will withstand drought, and not a total drought, but it will stand drier. Within reason. And you'll have a plant that's full and bushy and not tall and scraggly. So there you have it, folks. I know you don't like doing that. You hate doing that. That's why you plant flowers. But believe me, you will get more flowers if you do that. So get your scissors out and go at them.
She's right. And I know it's hard when you come in here because really we're so tempted to buy the ones with all the blooms. That's what we all gravitate to. But really, we should be buying the ones that don't have flowers really yet in bloom.
In buds. Lots of buds.
Yeah.
And you'll find lots of things that are in bud.
Yeah.
Things in bloom as well. But if they're in bloom, cut them off.
We can do it, guys.
It's a tough lesson, I know.
It'll pay off in the long run for sure. I've done this many times myself. And anything in the market, Elspeth, we should know about?
Rhubarb and asparagus are delicious.
Oh my!
And we have started making some special things on Fridays and Saturdays. So we have lemon meringue and coconut cream pie on Friday and Saturday. We have cheese bread, which is new to us. And it was very popular, and so popular everyone over the weekend asked for it, but we're only going to do it on Fridays and Saturdays, just because we have a lot to do, and it's kind of a specialty thing for the weekends.
Perfect. We need a little treat on the weekend.
It's a treat.
I picked up a loaf on Friday as soon as she pulled them out of the oven, I think. It was delicious. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So next weekend make a plan when you're here to pick up some of that.
And the spring produce will continue to arrive. We have lots of greens, spinach and greens, mixed greens. The asparagus are terrific. Rhubarb is in full force right now, so lots of really delicious rhubarb. So it's market season. We're happy to see people and happy to answer all the gardening questions.
Good. So Wales Lake Farm Market right here in Wileville, open every day from 9 to 6. Lots of staff here, besides Elspeth, of course, who's always here too, but lots of staff to help you with your gardening questions. And be sure to visit the bakery and the market kitchen and pick up anything you need there. Well, thank you so much, Elspeth. I'll let you get back to it, and thank you guys for watching. See you later.